I think of particular note is the fact that he mentioned that the twin drivers of the big elephant that the country is currently facing, insecurity, are poverty and unemployment. I think that the acknowledgement of that shows that the government and the president is aware that these are the two major drivers and something has to be done urgently to address these issues. Although what did not come out clearly from the speech was what his administration would do to further create jobs for opportunities for job creation for these young folks and the unemployed, and of course what they would do to deepen the issue of poverty and to further shrink the number of those who are poor. As you know, the administration have said they are going to raise 100 million Nigerians out of poverty in 10 years, but what is yet left to be seen is how that will materialize ultimately. So I would say the speech was tempered, as you expected. It's a written speech, and not much of anything to be inspired about, but he railed out some of his achievements and talked about some of the challenges the country is currently facing.
Now let's get your view, EJ. If you look at, let's just pick a few points of the achievements that he talked about that the president said his administration has achieved. He talked about the Anchor Borrowers Program, a sharp decline in food import. That's one of the achievements he credited to that Anchor Borrowers Program, saying in 2014 it was at $2.23 billion, but today there's a sharp decline in the import bill. What you have done is $0.59 billion. He also talked about rice import bill decline, initiatives to support local production of rice, maize, cotton, and cassava. Now, these are initiatives, but it does seem as if there's a fundamental problem, really, because as much as the government says this has happened in the country, we also saw youth troop out today, some Nigerians, despite all the threats, saying Buhari must go. That's some of the captions we saw today. And one begins to wonder, is it that these benefits are not being felt by the people, or as the government would say, these are just naysayers who wouldn't see anything good in government?
Thank you very much, and thank you to our viewers out there. If I may say, just to respond to my brother here, that the speech was written. Of course, speeches have to be written. Most leaders all over the world, speeches are written. And again, it is difficult as somebody have been in government. I've served as a former member House of Rep, and former board of Nigeria Railway Corporation, and today as a federal commissioner, fighting the menace of corruption in our dear nation. It's unfortunate. How did we get here? Mr. President Buhari, looking at what has happened all over the world, globally, the issue of the COVID, the pandemic. A lot of countries cannot even survive. They are not standing right now. And we have been able to succumb. And we have to appreciate what we have. If you don't value what you have, somebody will help you devalue it. I'm not holding brief. I'm not the spokesman for Mr. President, President Buhari, but as a Nigerian who love this country dearly, first of all, look at all the credits. We're talking about infrastructure development, that we have achieved for quite some time now, despite the odds and the insurgency. And it takes a village to raise a child, and it also take a village, the whole country, to put this country together. Mr. President cannot solve the problem of the menace of the insurgency, but unfortunately, quote and unquote, the cabal, the politicians, 2023 is around the corner. Somebody's tried to derail the will of progress of Mr. President, to discredit him, to put him in bad light, regardless of all that he has done, because he doesn't like to talk much. When he talks, they say he talks too much. When he doesn't talk, they say he's not speaking. It is this country. As a patriotic Nigerian, we should pray for our leaders, pray for our country. Like America, look at what is happening even in the United States. We're democracy that we borrow from. I lived in America for over 31 years. I've seen it all. This country, we are not where we used to be. We are not where we ought to be, but we are going somewhere, and we want that progression to be fast-tracked. Mr. President cannot do it alone. Both PDP, I was in PDP before. I served in the House of Rep as PDP and APC member. This country, whether you are APC, PDP, Afghan Labour, you are a Nigerian. Let's put Nigeria among the leading nations. If collectively, all of us, whether you are from the north or from the south, west, east, whatever is happening in the north, those in the south should feel the pain. Whatever is happening in the east, those in the west, we are all family. Okay. One country called Nigeria. All we are doing right now, we are just trying to whip settlement, and if care is not taken, it will consume every one of us.
Okay, but
hold on, let me finish.
Now is the time of
the problem is that those who derail, who had the opportunity to govern this country, they are the one parading themselves today. They are talking about restructuring. Okay, so let us restructure our heart, our mind, our soul, so that Nigerians can see the benefit. The youth that are suffering. Why would the youth be suffering? Why would they be all over? Because the poverty, money meant to develop this country, stolen.
All right.
Where's $16 billion?
Okay, Honorable, let's take a power project.
We'll come back
let's take a conversation right from the top, because you mentioned those who had been at the helm of affairs before now. President Buhari is the fourth amongst them. We said that in our introduction. Let's start from the beginning of this republic. Now, let's go to Samson Itodo. Samson, you've listened to those who have contributed so far in the studio. What's your assessment? Let's take it from 1999, May the 29th. Obasanjo, Yar'Adua, Jonathan, to this point.
We can hear you.
Go on.
Yes, I said Happy Democracy Day.
Well, same to you, my brother.
So first, if you look at our democracy and the journey over the last 22 years, have we made some progress? Yes, we have made some progress. Is this progress significant enough? I doubt if it is, regardless of the fact that we are still recovering from military dictatorship, even though we are in a democracy. But you can see that our political process is dominated by militias and not democrats in every respect of the word. If you look at, what are the venerated principles or values or institutions of democracy, look at, our democratic institutions, and you ask yourself, over the last 22 years, what can we say about the legislature? What can we say, about our political parties? What can we say about the machinery of dispensing justice, and that's the judiciary? And you can see that there are still vestiges of military dictatorship in our institutions. The judiciary is not independent, even though we've seen where the judiciary asserted its independence on several occasions. But we're still grappling, with access to justice as a country. And what is democracy if justice is not for all, but for a few? And that's where we are as a country, and it's quite sad, even though we are celebrating 22 years of democracy. If you look at human rights, on a daily basis, there's a decline on respect for human rights. As you know, Twitter is banned in Nigeria today. And why is that the case? Because, yes, a non-governmental institution that provides platforms for civic engagement seem to have been placed under ban by a government because the tweet of the president was deleted, although the government have said that it's beyond the tweet, and just banning Twitter is an assault on human rights, and this has always been the case since 1999, where just holding the state to account for Section 4 of the Constitution, or Chapter 4 of the Constitution, that deals with fundamental rights, have been a fundamental challenge, and that is really problematic. If you look at our political parties as well, yes, we seem to be making some progress, but at every point in time we make progress, we take 2 or 20 steps backwards. And that's quite sad. And why is that the case? It's the case because you have a political class that has decided to use political power to advance their own personal goal and agenda and not to advance the cause of the people. We had the poverty capital of the world today. And so if people question and interrogate our own kind of democracy, and I'd like to go on record that the Afrobarometer report that was just released on 2010 did say that over 74% of Nigerians desire democracy. But Nigerians are frustrated with the kind of democracy that we have in Nigeria. And these are two, parallel and different points. That yes, whilst Nigerians clamor for democracy, but the kind of democracy that we practice today is the one that Nigerians are frustrated about. And it's the one where our institutions cannot call the executive to account. They can't hold them to account. It's one where the security and the welfare of the people, is not taken seriously by the politicians. It's one where justice is for a few and not for all.
All right, Mr. Itodo, we'll come back to you, but we now have Dr. Hussein Abdul joining us in the studio. We introduced him earlier. He's the executive country director, I beg your pardon, CARE International. Thank you for joining us. We've had from some of the guests we have in the studio. Let's get your point. Mr. Itodo is saying that the kind of democracy Nigeria is practicing, I don't know, is democracy supposed to be two different kinds of democracy, really? Because from what he said, that the kind of democracy we're practicing is a type that Nigerians are feeling frustrated. And if you trace it back from the Obasanjo regime, I do remember that when the current administration was coming in, everybody wanted let me not say everybody, a majority of Nigerians were also frustrated with the PDP-led government at the time. And then they believed that the change that is coming will make life better for them. But today, the agitation still persists. And the people that fought for this democracy did promise that life is going to be better. Has life been any better?
Well, let me start from your first question. Are there different variants of democracy? Yes, there are. There are different conceptions of it. And there are different models of it around the world. Congo is a democratic republic, in fact, by its name. And you know what you actually have in Congo. North Korea is people's democracy. China is one. Russia is a democracy. United States is a democracy. The United Kingdom is a democracy, and Nigeria is a democracy. And so if you look at them and you look at the variant, you look at how they are all practiced, you will actually see the different expressions of it. But for some of us who actually have conversation on democracy, there are basic tenets of it. And some of those basic tenets are supposed to be universal. They are supposed to be universal irrespective of the context specificity of their expressions. And some of those basic tenets are about citizens' participation. They're about the rights of the people, including those that have been enshrined in the Chapter 4 of the Nigerian Constitution. They are about regularity of free and credible elections so that people can actually be able to elect their leaders. They are about decentralization of power and across the different spectrum of the society. And they are primarily about people, meaning that the whole essence of the existence of a government, or even the democracy as it were, is about the security and the public good. So these are the things, these are the basic principles around it. Yes, it is true that Nigerians expected something better during the course of our struggle for democracy. And I absolutely agree with Samson that we have made some progress, no doubt about it. We will be very unfair, or probably are not conversant with our history and where we are coming from, to sweeply dismiss that there hasn't been any progress of any kind. There are. But are we where we ought to be? No, absolutely no. Can we do better than we are currently doing? Yes. How is the pace of our progress? Very slow. But again, if you're a student of politics, you will also recognize that political development is not a linear process. It doesn't just keep going and going and going and going in a linear manner. That sometimes you make good progress, as sometimes you experience regressions. And I think that we have a foundational problem with our democracy. And that's the conversation that sometimes I don't see doing. Sometimes we reduce, as important as it is, but we reduce ourselves to a regime analysis. And at the end of the day, every regime that you have seen is the same issue you keep discussing, because you have failed to approach the conversation from the system perspective. This country inherited, we got our democracy through a military, rushly packaged process. And there was the impression, and our immediate impression after that was that, look, what we had was a transition, and that we are going to have a democracy later. And that part of that transition is to use the opportunity of a civil leadership to begin to put up structures and institutions that will provide a more enduring democracy. But what was the challenge with the military itself? One, we had a constitution that was hurriedly packaged. But along the line, somebody can tell you that, yeah, it was significantly around the 1979 constitution. And the 1979 constitution went through a very elaborate process to actually have it. Anyone can tell you that. But the truth about it is that we are calling it the 1999 constitution, and therefore we could say it is hurriedly packaged. Okay. Number two is that we have a democracy at a time that the state itself has been badly assaulted, meaning that institutions that holds us together have been badly assaulted by over 3 decades of military rule, where regime became a bit more personal, where citizens' engagement have been deeply undermined.
Okay.
And by the time we came in fully, the major challenge was that, look, we felt that the government was unnecessary, and therefore the private sector was the most important.
All right.
And we kept privatizing left, right, and center, and then today the state is useless.
This school of
it can
thought,
provide security, it can give you education, it can give you health services, because your feeling was that the private sector can do it for you.
These points are points that some raise at different fora to try to justify the reasons why probably different administrations in this Fourth Republic have not done what they ought to do. But let me bring in Idayat Hassan. She's joining us via Zoom. She's the Executive Director of the Center for Development and Democracy. Thank you so much for joining us once again. So Idayat, you've heard the appraisal of those who have spoken so far. Are our institutions being battered, that they cannot do what they ought to do in line with the Constitution?
Thank you very much. And to put it on notice, democracy and development, not the other way. I quite agree with all the contributors, even to the Federal Commissioner. We all have some things that are actually converging. But while we have actually made things, we cannot take that away, especially when we even look at periodic elections, which is held from 1999 until date, and even the quality of elections gradually increasing. We must also note that there are a lot of challenges. And what democracy actually means to most people is constitution and constitutionalism, which is what you have actually asked me. A constitution is in place, no matter how skewed it is, but is it actually being implemented? So when we talk in terms of separation of powers, and when we talk about that, we have the executive, we have the judiciary, and we have the legislature. And it is this legislature that actually defines, that is the core difference between a military regime and a democracy in the real sense of it. But what exactly is happening when it comes to the representation of citizens? When it comes to oversight, and when it comes to laws that will actually impact on the lives of Nigerians, how well have we actually fared in that direction? Okay, there has been lots of uproar as it relates to the 1999 Constitution of Nigeria. Since 1999 till date, 22 years, is it not enough for us to even benchmark and say that we now have a wholly new constitution that actually speaks to the yearnings of Nigeria, especially when we are talking in terms of watching democracy and not just doing regime analysis in terms of which administration is better than the other? Then when you look at the judiciary as well, in their own way, at least in their own little way, especially when we are not looking at election petition, they've actually done so well in terms of case development. But who is implementing all the judgments that has actually been given. That is the work of the executive. And we know that in the last couple of years, there has been selective implementation of judgment, which tells us again that this rule of checks and balances, separation of power, is not actually working. Now to my final point, which actually is the most important, especially when you start talking about democracy to citizens in terms of the right to participate, not just through elections, but through other means. And if you ask me personally, what represents democracy to me, I'll tell you it is that fundamental human right. The fact that I'm not actually afraid to voice my dissent, the fact that I'm not actually afraid to go out and protest and not be afraid that I will be climbed on, I can't be jailed without being brought to court for as much as 1 year, or being granted bail and it is not actually being implemented, then I'll tell you that somehow there is actually been a regression in the last 22 years in terms of human rights, particularly in this last 6 years. You check all the indexes, the Freedom House Index, you look at the Commission for the Protection of Journalists, look at virtually all indexes that actually assess Nigeria and the whole Committee of Nations as it relates to human rights, there has been a large regression. And I think based on that, we really need to be extremely careful.
All right, being extremely careful. Let's hear from the honorable member who is also joining us via our virtual platform, Honorable Toby Okechukwu. He's a deputy minority leader, House of Representatives. Honorable, you heard Idayat say the Constitution, even though there has been so many uproar about the Constitution as it is today, and is also the National Assembly is at the process of amending that Constitution, at least to suit the yearnings of Nigerians. But then, Idayat made mention of the fact that even the spirit and the letters of the Constitution, some parts of that Constitution, which is also still tenable, are not even being followed and strictly adhered to over the years. What would you say has been the reasons why it has been difficult to implement the letters of the Constitution?
Well, thank you very much. Happy Democracy Day. I don't know if you're hearing me.
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear.
Happy Democracy Day, Honorable Chukwu.
Thank you. Ije, thank you so much.
God bless you, brother.
So I want to thank Nigerians and wish them all the best. As a matter of fact, we have made some progress from 1999. And it is very evident that that progress has made it possible for us to be where we are, to practice democracy for the longest period running in Nigeria without occasioning or making it unfashionable for military intervention. I think that for me is some level of achievement. But we must also appreciate that our nation is under turmoil now. There is a clear state of anomy. In the president's speech, he made reference to the creative energies of our young people. He also made reference to the insecurity in our country today. The combined effect of the two makes it subjects you to do an interrogation of where we are. How is it that our young people are being creative overseas, but are not being creative in Nigeria? Why are there protests? It means that the environment is not clement, and it refers to the operations of the Constitution. The very clear idea which we would have wanted Mr. President to speak to, and we are happy that he's speaking to us in recent times with the Arise interview and the broadcast he made today. We never knew that it's a battle we have to win for our president who we employed. So that's a battle we have to win for him to talk to us. For us, it's a demerit because presidents and leaders arise in the times of emergency. You calm nerves, you pump some ice through your speeches, through inspiration. That has not been happening. So the Constitution is very clear, its spirit is very clear. There are some challenges, along the line, but that is why there are amendments to the Constitution. Presently, we are going through the amendment. The Constitution of the United States has been amended 27 times. A state like Alabama, since about 1901, when the Constitution came in place, has amended the Constitution up to 900 times. So there's no limit to it. As a matter of fact, even if you want to abrogate the Constitution, you must also create a clause or you must also make provisions on how you can abrogate the Constitution. So the only available de facto and the just situation we have is the Constitution. But the Constitution is as good as the operators of the Constitution. If, for instance, the Attorney General, even though he has denied it now, was able to state that Nigerians are going to be tried for an offense that has not been created by any law or constitution, you can understand the temperament of what we are dealing with here. As a matter of fact, I would have expected Mr. President to speak to issues regarding what is ailing Nigerians. If we have crisis in the 6 zones of this country, yesterday, some students were kidnapped from Kaduna Polytechnic. There has been some level of, there have been attacks in security infrastructure in the southeast. And in Kebbi State, a good number of Nigerians were murdered. In Nigeria, Nigerians were murdered. We would have wanted the president's speech to address those issues in our laws that will orchestrate dialogue, that will orchestrate the curing of the defects we are seeing. Why is it that the document is not working? Is it the operator, or is it the Constitution that is a problem? So we would have expected that Mr. President will tell us the strategies, the way to walk us to a point where we would not have this kind of malaise again.
Okay, we'll come back to you, Honorable Toby Okechukwu. I wanted to ask you a minute, because you've been in the House of Representatives now since 2007. Some other areas that you also may have been involved in or should have been involved in. Let's come back to the studio. Professor Ihua, let's appraise what the legislature has done in the last 22 years. Are you satisfied with the lawmakers' contribution to developing our democracy?
Well, thank you very much. Looking at what the lawmakers have done, I want to look at it from more of a social cohesion perspective. A few years ago, in 2019, I led a team of researchers to conduct a social cohesion survey in Nigeria. The concept of social cohesion talks about the willingness of citizens to cooperate and work together towards the survival of the country and towards the prosperity of the country. So looking at Nigeria, yes, we can say we are surviving as a nation, but the other part is the prosperity part of it. And talking about the legislature, they are representatives of the people. And the surveys we have conducted so far have shown that Nigerians are not necessarily happy with the representations they have been receiving so far. Let me say that when we conducted these studies on social cohesion, there were 5 key considerations or 5 key components. The first is identity. How do people see themselves? Do people see themselves first as Nigerian or from their ethnic groups? 2, the issue of trust. How much trust do Nigerians have in the state, that the state will look after them, that the state would have their backs, that the state will protect them? The third is the issue of equity and social justice. Are all Nigerians equal in the sight of the law, or are there some Nigerians equal than others? And the fourth is patriotism. Would Nigerians be willing to cooperate with other citizens to make the country work? Would they be willing to engage? Would they be willing to participate in the political process if need be? And would they be willing to even join, for example, the military to defend the country if they are called upon? And the fifth has to do with the future expectations. I can say categorically that from our polls, our work as researchers, we have seen that the average Nigerian is not looking to divide this country or separate this country. If for anything, The surveys have shown that Nigerians are willing to cooperate, willing to work together, willing to, put their resources, put their energy together for a united Nigeria. However, the challenge has been that Nigerians feel that they have not been treated fairly. And that's why we are receiving clamors in various parts of the country, skirmishes here and there. What Nigerians are looking for is a fair, equitable, and just nation that provides services of governance to everyone, in spite of where people come from, in spite of their background, their religion, their tribe, or what have you.
Do you think, Prof, that
yes,
the various legislature that have come in, we have the 4th, the 5th Assembly, up to the 9th now. Do you think they have kowtowed too much to the executive, that they've become, like some say, powerless?
Well, the truth is that some have, tried to stand their ground, but the current legislature, from what we gather from the field and from the opinion of Nigerians, are that the current legislation has not been active enough to play their oversight functions, to engage the executives, especially when the chips are down, when there have been critical issues, especially in the area of insecurity. Last year in October, we had the issue of the End SARS protest. Especially young Nigerians are not satisfied with this current legislature and its engagement with the executive to be able to ensure that all Nigerians have the benefits of democracy. What we can also see from our own work is that it may have seen that, for example, the End SARS may have been quenched, but we know that it hasn't been quenched. On the ground, people are still organizing, people are still engaging, people are still discussing, and we need those conversations to happen. Because as long as we continue to have those conversations that is turning towards how can we improve the country, how can we put leaders in place, how can we ensure that the country gets right leaders that will help move it forward, those conversations need to continue. And we've seen that happen, and we hope that it continues to happen.
All right, let's get your view, EJ. Many people are actually wondering, the agitation that Nigerians are putting out there has started happening even before the democracy we're celebrating today, until we got this civilian rule, and everybody was happy that life will be better. Now, let's look at what today represents the democracy, the June 12th struggle, the electoral law, which Nigerians are yearning for at this time. Because what Doctor is saying can only start by getting leaders at the top who will do the needs of Nigerians and make Nigerians feel belonging to the country. But if we have flaws in the electoral laws and we're not able to get the right leaders, at the helm of affair, then there's a problem. So looking at what is happening, the struggle that led to the June 12 election, which everybody has adjudged to be the freest and fairest election so far, have we started getting elections right?
Thank you very much, my dear sister. I'm a victim. You're talking about electoral law. I'm one of the victims where some of the ANEC officers robbed me of the election, wrote the result in his house, and the DSS investigated the matter. The same man who changed the number, the figure, they found all the results in his house. This matter is still in court. That is ANEC. But I'm not saying that they haven't done well. They have done well in many cases, but there's still room for improvement. Nothing is perfect all over the world. You see what happened in America. So electoral process, we borrow whatever we are doing here today in Nigeria democratically. We borrow it from the United States of America. It's not even perfect. So ours is not perfect, but I'm saying, I said before, we are not where we used to be, but we are not where we ought to be. We need to progress, and we need to fast-track that progression. Unfortunately, let me say this. Federal government, we have 3 tiers of government. We have federal, state, and local government. We talk much about federal. We talk less about the state and the local government. Why are we not talking about all this? Nigerians, the youth are suffering. When I was in the house, I moved several motions. I'm happy that my friend, my brother, the young man, Itodo, the bill, not too young to run, I was part of it. How many times he came to my office? how we can put, heads together. And they were able to achieve that, and it became law. It was passed unanimously. That is progress in making. Now, let's go back to the 3 tiers of government. Democracy is for the people, by the people, and of the people. A democracy without the grassroots, without the people, the local government, you have to start from there. That is where democracy embedded, especially for the people. Now, what happened to them? The state governor took everything, hijacked everything. Money that is meant for the local government to develop the local government because they are closer to the grassroots, the local government. They took all, and at the end of the day, nothing to write home about. Now, the state government, what are they doing? Because there's a cabal here. I'm sorry. The cabal that I'm seeing, not only in Abuja, they're in various states, whereby they come together to form an alliance to the detriment of those living in their own state. Let all of us concentrate, develop your state, make your state proud. Some are doing well.
Now, isn't that what we're talking about, electing the right people, even at the subnational and the local government level you're talking about?
To get the right people, look at people's track record. I'm happy that Mr. Honorable, Toby, is on the line. We were colleagues in the House. I know what I did when I was in the House. How much people I was able to empower, how many motions, how many bills I sponsored. I'm not saying that is the issue, but the issue is this. Is you and I, all of us collectively, have a role to play. The body of contention, whether you like it or not, the insurgency today, where money meant to develop the country, stolen, gone to voicemail, to global destination. It was here. I've been on this platform, on this AIT and various platforms, talking about how much was stolen from this country. I moved this motion at the floor of the House. Billions gone to voicemail, Swiss Bank, Citibank, West Fargo, Bank of America, all over the world. Now, what happened? We are talking about if Nigeria had to move forward, the money that is meant to coaching, to develop our youth, they go to school, graduated, 4 years supposed to be, they end up graduating for 6, 7, 8 years, and when they are out, hold on, no job, nothing, because somebody stole your money yesterday.
Okay.
Who stole that money?
We'll come back to you. We'll come back to you for more on that.
Mr. President, Buhari is not the bone of contention.
We'll come back to you. We'll come back to you on that.
It's not the president that we are addressing.
No, but there's a cabal. Whipping sentiment, try to destroy the because of what?
At this point, we'll take a break.
We'll take a break and we'll bring you some of the happenings across the country on a day like this that Nigerians are celebrating Democracy Day.
We are protesting for him to stay because we don't want problem in this country. Because when we said he should just leave the seat, there will be a lot of problem, a lot of crisis, and some people out there that want this country to destroy will take advantage of what is happening and do anything they want to do, and everything will just turn upside down the way we don't want it.
Now we don't see. Buhari must go! Buhari must go! Free Stop injustice! Stop injustice! Buhari must go! Buhari must go! Stop injustice! Stop injustice! Buhari must go! Buhari must go! Stop injustice! Stop injustice! Buhari must go! Buhari must go!
Tell her to climb that place now. She should climb. See, tell her to climb that place. The one year off. It doesn't make sense.
Of the killings, enough of the hardship, enough of everything. We are saying we don't want killings. Estimates are killing us. We can't sleep with our 2 eyes closed. So all we are saying is we are putting an end to this hardship. Let him readdress the system of this government. Our voice must be heard. We are we're moving in one movement.
I want good governance. I don't want hunger in the land of Nigeria. I want everybody to live fine and be good. That is what I mean. I want the government to listen to the voice of the youth. That is all we are here to ask for. Yes.
Government cannot provide security again. It is clear. In Benue, they are killing our people. We are not secure. In Imo, they are killing our people. We are not secure. In Ibayakwa, they are killing our people. We are not secure. We are crying right now that this government cannot help this situation.
Every day, there must be an end to the killings, the banditry, and the kidnapping that symbolize the government of Buhari. The government has been silent on our yearnings and aspirations. We can no longer be silent.
Ṣèbáyé ti kàdé wà lọ́wọ́ àbí.
All right, protests across Nigeria in a day Nigeria is supposed to be celebrating Democracy Day and rejoicing about developments in the country. Let's bring in Samson Itodo here, the Executive Director, Yaga Africa. Samson, I'm sure you watched that clip that we played now, and I'm wondering what was going on in your mind when that clip was going on, because despite the warnings from the police that people should not go out to protest, we still saw Nigerians across the country trooping to the streets to register their grievances. Do you get a sense of true agitation of the people? Because I was actually expecting to hear people say things like, we want insecurity to end, we want food scarcity to end, we want improvement in governance, and in some parts we're hearing Buhari must go. Is that actually the true feeling of the people, or I don't know, what do you make of the whole thing?
So, to be honest, I feel very happy and excited at the clip that you just showed, because that's an expression of democracy. That's what democracy is about. That people have the freedom, to express themselves. It's a fundamental principle of democracy that people have the liberty. And these liberties cannot and should not be restricted in any form. So the people on the street are Nigerians. Do they have a right to protest? It's a constitutionally guaranteed right. We may not agree with their approach or the issues that they are advancing, but honestly, that's democracy. So what they have done or what they are doing today is an expression of a democratic right that is constitutionally guaranteed. But if you look at the key issues, it boils down to the instrumental dimension or the instrumental implications of democracy. That democracy, exists to do what? To serve the public good. And the public good in this case is the issue around the welfare and the security of the people. And if the people feel insecure, and if the people feel that there's poverty on a high increase, there's loss of jobs, they have every right to speak. After all, if this is a democracy, then the government has to listen to them. So I honestly identify with some of the agitations. We feel very insecure today in Nigeria. The civic space is shrinking on a daily basis. Maybe what you didn't also show, and on social media, there are also reports of attacks by security agencies on the protesters, particularly in Lagos, and that's unacceptable. These are Nigerians who have a right to protest, and if they do so in a civil manner, then the state should not clamp down on protesters. And that, for me, is my reflection. And if I were the administration, is to listen to the agitations of these people and not, ascribe the agitations or the protests that the NSAS and particularly young people engaged as an attempt to upstage the government of President Muhammadu Buhari. I think that it will be disingenuous for the government to think because what the government is trying to do and I watched the interview by the president, is to rewrite the story. These young people who protested during the NSAS protest were protesting against police brutality. They were protesting against the failure of leadership to provide their security. And so let's not politicize this issue and try to claim that these young people wanted to upstage the government. After all, if they are tired with the government, they have a right to voice it. But you cannot upstage a government, through arms and through violence. It has to be through a constitutional order. Do we have a constitutional order today in Nigeria? Yes, we do. And what is that order? That the leadership recruitment process is via elections. And therefore, if you're tired of this administration, people should do what? Should go and register to vote and vote at elections, and not the low turnout of voters that we see at elections.
Right.
The second stream is the role that the legislature plays, because the legislature has a fundamental role to serve as checks, on the executive. And if there are two representatives of the people, and the people say they are tired of the executive, the legislature can do what? Can hold the executive to account. They can even impeach the president. And the Constitution provides, the express provisions for impeachment of the executive. And where, citizens feel they are not represented by their elected representatives in the legislature, they can also recall their legislators. Yeah. But like has been said in this discussion, that you have a constitution that needs to be reviewed, a constitution where these mechanisms for accountability are not only weak, but they make it very difficult and impossible to implement. And that, for me, is a fundamental discussion that we must have. Okay. Now, how do we open the spaces for accountability? And the president made that point, in his Democracy Day remark about accountability. Yes, it is good. Open the space, strengthen citizens' engagement so they can hold their leaders to account. But the state must also recognize that when citizens make those demands and ask those difficult questions, the response isn't to deploy security agents and legitimize the use of state power against citizens. It's not about arresting protesters and detaining them unlawfully. It's not about extrajudicial killings. It's not about criminalizing dissent and tagging every citizen that questions government as opposition or an anti-Buhari's or anti-APC. They do so because they love this country. They are patriotic citizens of this country. And if we are a democracy and we recognize that we are, then the people, when they make these demands, they do so. It's an expression of a democratic right that is already guaranteed in our Constitution.
Thank you very much, Samson. Let's bring in Idayat Hassan. Idayat Hassan, let's look at the relationship, the checks and balances that the Constitution envisages of the three arms of government. In the last 22 years, do you think they've checked up on one another to ensure the polity is stable?
No, I think that, in fact, since 2019, everything seems to have gone horrid, particularly with the removal of the Chief Justice of the Federation, Walter Honogen. And until date, he was never said to actually be guilty. It's not even his guilt or not, like we said at that point in time, that he should honorably step down. But the processes that actually led to his removal, I think that's the first point where, as Nigerians, we should actually have become very circumspect and realize that authoritarianism has actually gradually crept in. And you find that at every course, especially when it comes to the judiciary, minus the fact that the judgments are not implemented. There are many people who have actually gotten judgment for their rights violations. And we saw them during this NSAS panel coming up again before the panel to state that, yes, we got a judgment against the police, we got a judgment against the military, but this judgment is not implemented. And who has got the implementation rights? That is the executive. And even with the NSAS, with all the panels that have actually been established, some have concluded hearings, some, of course, we know they did nothing. But again, who is going to implement those things? because it comes to the federal level. So the implementation of judgments, it's something of court decisions, is something that has actually eroded in the last couple of years. When it comes to legislative oversight, I think that what we've seen more is at times, maybe at the House of Representatives, we should even give it to them, that in some certain instances, they've taken some positive decisions. But as a whole, the Ninth Assembly, how will we grade them? Especially when we look at 3 issues that's actually affecting Nigeria now. One is the democratic backsliding, which we all complain about, in terms of rights violation, in terms of the freedom of the press, human rights, just all the basics, chapter 4 of the 1999 Constitution of Nigeria as amended. Instead, there has actually been an attempt to make it derogable by clinking all to the section 45 subsection 2 of the Constitution at every point in time. But what is also important is insecurity. Corruption has actually allowed this insecurity to further get aggravated. And who has got the job of the oversight? It is the legislature. We have not seen them in action. In terms of doing the right thing, thirdly is the pandemic, which the whole world is actually grappling with. We saw the Buhari administration vote huge amounts of money to alleviate the suffering of Nigerians during this pandemic. But in the real sense of it, what has actually happened? It's a tale of 2 pandemics, as we have put it in our recently released report, which is corruption and the COVID-19 pandemic. But the legislature that is actually meant to do the oversight refused to actually do the oversight. An example is the NDDC. And you got the people saying they had to take care of themselves. After all the uproar, the whole story has ended with off your mic. The PIB is there. It has not been passed. The Electoral Act, which will actually affect everybody and is the fulcrum of democracy itself, because you have the right to choose anybody of your choice peacefully. That is what democracy means to people. But to get quality elections, you need an electoral act that speaks to all the previous challenges. This is yet to be passed. So beyond oversight, the core duties of this legislature, who are the people who represent each and every one of us Nigerians in the National Assembly, and who are there to fight for us, is actually not being done. So it's not just about the judiciary, who may actually be afraid, especially in a season when everybody is afraid.
All right. Diet, thank you for your points there. Let's get the honorable member that is also joining us via a virtual platform to respond to some of the issues you raised. Honorable, from what Diet said, it does appear as if the legislature has not performed its oversight function or tried to hold even the executive accountable. It does appear as if you are just there. I heard when you are doing, of course, it was the Senate president who said that that the National Assembly is not rubber stamp. But to many Nigerians, it would appear that, that is what is going on. And that is why the executive can exercise excessive powers without anybody putting them under control. Your take?
Thank you very much. You must also realize that what you have is a situation where the APC government is able to have their representatives, elect whoever they wanted as Speaker and the Senate President. And there's some level of convergence where they have to work together. But I do not think that the Ninth Assembly has been laid back. As a matter of fact, we have been upfront. Even the NDDC issue you are talking about was raised by the legislature. It was an investigation of funds that were, alleged to have been misappropriated. And it was in the course of the investigation that Nigerians got to know Then you talked about the COVID pandemic and all that, and then the palliatives that were being. It was the insistence of the legislature, even at the leadership level, that made it possible for us to begin to know what is happening. Prior to then, the palliatives were going just, we are not accountable. And it was based on an ad hoc committee that was dispensing favors as they liked. We had cause to ask some of our constituents whether they were getting it. They said no. And the legislature had to interrogate it. That was when they had to make sure that there was some level of even distribution. So the legislature is there. But as a matter of fact, the legislature is as good as the citizenry. You know, the major issues we have in this country is that we had an Obasanjo, President Obasanjo was the president. We also had President Yaradua. We also have President Goodluck. We have to be very clear-headed that we are having a different type of regime, a regime that that's difficult to adhere to the wishes and aspirations of Nigerians. Otherwise, this is the first time in our history we used to have problems in the Northeast, or in isolation in the Middle Belt, or in isolation in the Southwest, or in isolation in the Southeast. But presently, we are completely engulfed. And it is the character of the regime that is occasioning it. Otherwise, there is no way we wouldn't be addressing some of these challenges.
So that's why we are asking, Honorable, that's why we are asking why the legislature appears to be complacent, not doing anything. If you say the executive has not done what
the legislature is not complacent. If you talk about the Electoral Act, it was sufficiently amended and the president did not sign it. This constitution, there isn't anything you are talking about in the constitution now that was not addressed. We are just going to go back to do it again. Even when APC set up their report, El-Rufai committee, they recommended some level of devolution, restructuring, made very, very incisive recommendations on how that has to be done. We are asking APC to bring it forth so that it becomes a document of parliament and let them come to speak to it. They are not able to do that.
Okay, let me bring in Dr. Sini Abdul. Dr. Sini Abdul, citizens engagement and participation by those who are in the helm of affairs.
Honorable is still talking. Honorable, hang on, we'll come back to you. Let's get the view or let our guest in the studio react,
okay.
Right?
Okay, yeah, so Dr. Hussein, maybe you react some of the positions raised by Honorable Toby Okechukwu, saying the legislature has done its part. But I want us to always stress the discussion within the last 22 years, so that it's not like it's a fixation on a particular administration. Do you think the citizens of this country should have confidence in the legislature?
Yes, I think so. I think they should have confidence in the legislature. And I think that, for me, I'm not a lawyer, and therefore I don't speak normatively, that this is what the law say and normal, and then it has to be just like that. I look at it normatively and also look at it contextually. Democracy is not an absolutely correct, fantastic thing. It has its limitations. And that is what every democracy is still a work in progress. Even the most advanced of a democracy is actually trying to improve itself. Everywhere you go, in the parties, in the political party electoral democracy, where you actually have a relatively limited legislative system, because the party is not just an electoral machine, but it is also a disciplinary structure that once you are elected under a particular party platform, unless you rebel, you are sometimes expected to subscribe to the positions of the party. Where we run into a very simplistic differentiation between the 8th Assembly and the 9th Assembly is that we forgot that the 8th Assembly was led by an opposition, not by a ruling party. Even when the leadership was in the ruling party, it was an opposition. And then it eventually left the ruling party to the opposition party. And then on this particular one, the ruling party learned from its experience on the 8th and put up a different structure in the 9th. And that's a challenge. Look, there's a whole different about the role of the legislature in the parliamentary system and in the presidential system.
Clearly.
In the parliamentary system, the parliament, that's why it's called a parliamentary system. The parliament owns the government. Because even the prime minister, who is the head of the government, is part of the parliament. In the presidential system, it is a dictatorship of the president. That is why the president can even circumvent law and go out and produce his own decrees that you call executive orders. He fails to get it through in the parliament. He goes out and produce an executive order. That's the challenge. Look, even if you go, the model that we practice is an American model. Check, for instance, the relationship once the ruling party is also controlling the legislature. Check the relationship. Even if the government is as bad, we've seen that with Trump. We've seen the challenge that the Republicans and the Democrats have, even in the American parliament. So I think when we analyze this thing, we also look at them contextually so that we don't over-expect too much. We don't expect too much from the parliament. And that's where I agree with what the other legislator was talking about, the role of citizen. The role of citizen is very key because even when the parliament is not seen to be performing its responsibility, if you produce a critical citizenry, it is able to compel the parliament to act in a particular manner. But when you expect the parliament to be in opposition, to serve the role of an opposition party, or to serve the role of, or rebel against a particular institutional framework that supports them, it becomes a problem. That's why you have caucuses in the parliament, party caucuses. Is to whip you. That's why the parties have whips, to whip you online. And that line is the fact that you must follow a particular position, which may not necessarily be the party can be the dominant thing.
Does that not mean that...
It's part of the frailties of democracy. It's part of the frailties of party system that we need to continue to penetrate and improve upon.
So from what you're saying, there can be absolute checks and balances the way it's structured at the moment.
There can be absolute in the party, it can be absolute. You may find certain situation of fine outing. You know, you could find a strong-willed member of the legislature who decided to defy certain even party disciplinary positions and do the right, what we all see as the right thing. We may see the party or the legislature getting frustrated by a certain act of the executive and then come up and act in a particular manner. But we cannot see consistently a legislature that is standing in opposite of the executive when the majority is from that same party. It's one of the limitations, and I think we should all understand how democracy operates everywhere. If you're operating in the parliamentary system, this person is your colleague, he messes up. Even with that, you see struggle if he controls the majority in the parliament. You see struggle. So that's part of the challenge. When you have independent candidates, you have now if you go to Algeria, where they're wrapping up elections, and majority of the people that are elected are independent candidates, then you will see what the legislature is going to look like. But my fear is that at the end of the day, they will coalesce, the independent people will coalesce and form a party. That's part of the limitations. And that's why it's a work in progress that we will need to continue to work on to improve. Look, we are better than American Parliament. You have a Senate president. Americans don't have a Senate president.
It's the vice president that acts in that way.
No, I'm just trying to institutionally.
Let's get props.
That's a good one.
Institutionally speaking, if you look at the structure, but in terms of performance, it may differ. But when you talk in terms of the conversation around separation of power, I'm just bringing this example to show that separation of power is not expected to be absolute.
In the presidential
but institution
in every system. You need to understand that in every system, government is one. And this organ, that's why they are called organs. They are called organs, like human organs that make the body to perform. So these organs must actually have, the moment they are operating in a different direction, they are sick. You will fall sick. The heart, the lungs, and so this is the problem. This is why sometimes, for those of us in political science, we find it sometimes you don't agree with lawyers when they actually speak some of these things.
You will respond to that. I can see you are itching, but let's get a Prof. Prof, you said something about the survey that your organization carried out, the Social Cohesion Survey. From what he said the people, you don't expect too much from the parliament, so the people must rise up if the parliament doesn't seem to be performing. Now, from that your survey and the revelations you got there, what do you think we can do now going forward to deepen this democracy we're practicing at the moment?
Thank you very much for this question. First things first, I think there are widespread perceptions of exclusion and marginalization around the country. Even in the north, you conduct polls, you conduct surveys, you still find out people who maybe for some reason, maybe they didn't even have access to palliatives, and you come down south. And these perceptions of marginalization and perceptions of exclusion is creating a lot of rift. So it's important that we begin to, create systems and institutions that help, help the country come together and help to build the sort of bond, help to give Nigerians a sense of belonging. Because essentially what Nigerians are looking for is a sense of belonging. That sense of belonging is not there. We need to help create inclusion. Certain regions of the country are clamoring that they want this or they want that. We need to open up the space.
When you say we need to open up the space, yes. Who are the we you are referring to?
I'm referring to governments both at federal level and at state levels, even at local government levels, as Honorable mentioned, not just federal level. The way government is being run is that certain people see themselves as we are the ones running government, and citizens see themselves as being excluded. We need to change that format and have a system where citizens can see themselves as having ownership in government. Citizens can see themselves as belonging. And it's that sense of belonging, that absence, that is giving a lot of Nigerians the thinking to say, oh, they are on their own doing their thing, we're on our own doing our thing, nobody's looking after us, nobody's speaking for us. That needs to happen. But in terms of also solutions, I think that our military personnel, for example, are doing a lot, and a lot of support needs to be given to them. These are men and women in the front lines, putting their lives at risk to protect this country, to protect citizens. A lot more support, not just from the government, even from citizens. A lot more support needs to be given to our military to boost their morale and ensure that they can continue to do their work to keep the country safe. Okay. A lot of work needs to be done in security, and if we don't give them that support, we'll continue experiencing the challenges we're experiencing.
Honorable Agbonima, the office of the citizen, some call it the first citizen. How do we encourage the citizenry of this country to continue to be optimistic? You saw those youths who were protesting in the clips we played. How can we encourage them to have that optimism?
Before I answer your question, I just want to correct some submission here by our sister who spoke on the issue of former Chief Justice of the Federation, Justice Onoge, his removal, that it was partisanship. But let me get this clear to Nigerian people. First of all, I'm a Federal Commissioner Code of Conduct Bureau. And at the time, of course, you all know, nobody's above the law. Not even Mr. President or either EJ. I'm not above the law. When you have faulted the system, because ignorance is not admissible in law. So the bond of contention rests on former CJN, not President Buhari, not Code of Conduct Bureau. Because that matter will be addressed properly so that Nigeria will know the exact situation, what really happened. At the time, over 200 SAN came out to support him. But by the time they saw the evidence, everybody started leaving one by one. So please, let's guide whatever we are saying on the public domain, on television, because people are watching. That is for that. Talking about the palliative, that yes, the government got a lot. They came up, Mr. President said, look, let's see what we can do to push in. Because Nigerians were suffering. People were at home, my people from my state, they were all suffering across the country. What did Mr. President do? He was able to reach out to others, what we call CSO, Corporate Social Responsibility. Yeah. A lot of people contributed, and government also brought in what to do to help the needy. But what happened? This money, this palliative, were given to various states.
Yeah, that's correct. They were given to the states.
They were given to various
shared.
states. What happened? If not the NSA that exposed a lot of this atrocity.
Yeah, the blame was not being put to hold on.
No, I'm the one that brought it. Hold on.
Sorry,
let me finish my submission.
Because you had a couple of minutes to make your final points.
Don't let me just present my, the reason.
Okay, yeah,
she raised an issue. I needed to correct it.
Yeah, quickly, sir.
So what I'm saying is that for her, yes, because information is power, she does not have the correct information because ignorance in law is not admissible. So let me go back. The problem, to answer your question,
the citizenry.
You are one of them.
Clearly.
I am one of them. All of us here, we are all Nigerians. Seeing a crime be committed, refusing to report the scene of that crime to the nearest law enforcement agency, you are as guilty as the man or woman who committed that crime. So we are all responsible. So we all should be accountable, not only Mr. President. In America, if you see somebody committing a crime and you refuse to report, and later they discover that you saw it, you'll be invited and you'll be queried. Are you with me? So don't say everything rests upon Mr. President. No. All of us here, I'm happy everybody have their own, submission in different ways or different means. But what is important is that we have one country called Nigeria. That if we don't collectively to put our heads together, this is not about APC or PDP or Aga Labour. We must put partisan politics aside. Let's come together that what is happening in the north. At the time, they were killing people in the north. A lot of people were being killed in the northern part of Nigeria. I want to see those in the south join hands how to fight the menace to support our brothers and sisters over there. And if the same thing is happening in the east, like what's happening in the east, all of us should come together to see, look, I grew up in the east. Let's work together for a common purpose. Because if you have blood flowing through you, and if you are created by God, listen, God said we should love one another and appreciate one another. But is that what you are doing? So for me, to curb the menace of corruption, like all these things we are saying, like I said it before, our bond of contention, the real issue, that is resting upon this nation is corruption that has eaten us deeply. It's a total cancer that needs eradication. And when you fight corruption, what happened? All these things you are seeing today, because who is not suffering? Our youth. Yeah. Our youth, no employment, nothing to write home about. Look, it's painful. I have children. I was growing up. They used to tell us, oh, they are building the future, the next generation for us. I'm over 60 now. They are still building the next generation for me. Are you with me? And those who were in the helm of affairs who had the opportunity to put this country right, they destroyed this country. They destroyed Nigerian people. Don't forget, at the time, we won World Cup in Atlanta. I was there.
No, you mean the Olympics?
Yes, World Cup Olympics. The former president, George Bush, he won Nigerian T-shirt. He's always there supporting Nigeria. Do you know what happened? How we won that game? It didn't matter whether the person from the north or from the south or from the east or from the west. When we won and we were victorious, we were all celebrating. Yeah. Even the white folks were celebrating with Nigerians. But unfortunately, what has happened over the years, there's what we call misplacement of priority. Okay. I'm paying for this country. I love this country. But the bond of contention to come back home. By God's grace, member of the Code of Conduct Bureau, enshrined in the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, as amended in 1999, is to fight corruption. If really we want to fight corruption, when you are employed, public servant, civil servant, you employ today, you must declare your asset. And when you are leaving, you must declare your asset. To see what you have is commensurate with your source of income.
All right.
Okay. So if we are able to report everyone that you find out, you think that they have the ready will of progress of moving this country forward, why can't you report? Or let us know.
All
that
right.
is what we are here.
The citizens
the president, the citizen, like all of us together. I want to appreciate all of you.
All right, so let's get the views of our panelists on the virtual platform. Samson, what we're looking at now is how to deepen the democracy. Now, one thing that everyone on the panel today has agreed to is the fact that democracy has helped Nigeria. We have gone a bit far, but we haven't gotten to where we should be. So thinking of deepening democracy, what exactly should we be doing at this point?
So there are four things I think we need to do. The first one is we need to decondense power. Um, and what I mean is there's a lot of concentration, of power within within few individuals. And these individuals cut across different geographical or religious extractions. So let me not be misunderstood. We need to decondense power. Honorable Ige talked about a cabal. I think there's a lot of power that is concentrated in individuals and a group of individuals. So we need to decondense that power. The second is decentralization and devolution. We need to strengthen our local government system. The 8th Assembly did pass the Constitution on amendments on local government autonomy. But what happened? The state legislature voted against it. And that's problematic because this whole federal structure that we have, also gives powers to the states, and the states have some level of powers, to determine what goes into the Constitution. But you have an overbearing, powerful set of governors that dictate what happens at the state legislature, despite the independence that the legislature enjoy based on the constitutional amendment. And you just see that, yes, there is devolution of power de facto and de jure. Whilst the Constitution, yes, grants, autonomy to the legislature at the state level, in practice, you still see this interference and this overbearing influence on the governor. So we need to restructure that level of power sharing at that level. Now, our local governments need to enjoy some form of relative autonomy. I hope that, the Constitution amendment process or review process, whatever we call it, needs to address that. And I strongly push that we do need a constitution. We need a new conversation about, the Nigerian state itself and those who belong and the powers that they have and, access to decision making. Very important. And if we're going to increase citizens' participation in this democratic process, the National Assembly needs to amend Section 9 of the Constitution on the mode of amending the Constitution. And it's been advanced here that the current amendment procedure based on the Constitution does not guarantee citizens' participation. How can you have a very important public, political, or legal document, whatever you call it, like the Constitution, without citizens' participation being guaranteed and embedded therefrom? The third point is about access to justice. You go online and just even hear experiences that Nigerians have with the criminal justice system in Nigeria. And today, we talk about whistleblowing, or even Honorable who talks about, reporting crime. How many people have reported crime today and they themselves have become the criminals? How many people, have been detained unlawfully, but they cannot even gain access to representation, but you have a legal aid council. So the access to justice needs to be strengthened. Yes, you have, the ACJA, the Administration of Criminal Justice Act. You have, several existing legislations. But I think it's very important that we need to strengthen access to justice so Nigerians believe and have faith that when their rights are infringed upon, or when there is any conflict, there is a judiciary where they can obtain justice, that the courts will uphold the principles of justice, accountability, and equity in the administration of justice.
Okay.
And I cannot end, by talking about elections, that the 9th National Assembly does have an opportunity. This politics that is being played with the current Electoral Amendment Act is unacceptable by the Nigerian people, and the National Assembly need to rise to the occasion and give to Nigerians, an electoral law that can fix some of the problems that we have. They've moved the goalposts several times. They said in December 2020 then March 2021. Now the National Assembly is saying June. The House Committee and the Senate Committee have concluded their job. They've submitted a report to the leadership. Why is the leadership of the National Assembly playing ping pong with the electoral amendments? It just tells
fundamental questions.
That 600 and something days to the 2023 elections, we don't have an electoral law. But whilst we talk about the electoral law, we must note that we cannot have elections that are better than our country. If we don't fix this country, because elections happen within a context, if we don't address this issue around exclusion, if we don't address the issues of insecurity, and the fact that people are struggling to belong to a state and a country that they love very much, and if the president cannot symbolize, national unity and ensuring that there's national integration and mobilizing citizens irrespective of their geographical extraction and part of the decision-making process, then we will not make any headway.
Thank you very much, Samson Itodo, for your concluding remarks there. Let's head to Idayat Hassan, the Executive Director of the Center for Democracy and Development. Idayat, your closing thoughts. Progress, how do we achieve this? Okay, Honorable Toby Okechukwu is still there. I'm sure Idayat will join us. Honorable Okechukwu, you've been in the National Assembly now 12 or is it 14 good years. How do we achieve the progress that we were expecting?
Yeah, thank you very much. My friend and colleague EJ talked about cabal and then the issue of corruption. These are symptoms of a problem. And I think we should better go to the root cause. During the previous regimes, there wasn't any issue of cabal. If you have cabal now, then it is the attitude of the present regime that is determining their altitude. Second is that there has to be a better management of our diversity. There has to be inclusion, as been stated here. There isn't any way you can create the impression that some people are not wanted in this country. You have to be inclusive. You are elected president to be president of all, no matter who votes for you. That is the call for leadership. Leadership is made of standard stuff. So we need to make sure we develop power. Of the exclusive needs to lose weight, sufficient weight, as possible for a state to generate power to supply the whole of Lagos, for instance. Why shouldn't be able to do that? So such things should not be in the exclusive list. The federal government, as a matter of fact, should be faced. And the issue of the issue of interface with foreign bodies, customs, immigration, these are their core. We need to have a situation where, if our borders are leaking, there has to be a border frontier force that checks in the influx of people. It is not sufficient continuing to blame people who are coming from Libya or from outside Nigeria. That you have identified that is a call to duty. When we analyze and see that, we are having security problems, we have appreciated we have security problems. That is why we hire a new president. That is why we say, come and do this job. It is not sufficient explanation to say that, we're having crises here and there. No, these problems exist to be solved. So there has to be a clear and better management of our diversity so that many of our citizens do not feel a sense of injustice, a sense of inequality. If, for instance, you talk about headers problems, and I do not know why we shouldn't have a policy that makes it possible that these people who are involved in animal husbandry is given a proper and better framework to manage their affairs for better productivity. It doesn't have to be a battle we have to win. That look, it is not possible to subject 15-year-old children to work the bush. A good number of our citizens are having ranches. That is the way to go. There has to be a livestock policy which has been addressed and discussed by government. Put it in place so that it serves everybody. We don't have to have any problem that it has to engulf the entire nation. There has to be a way going forward. And anything that makes it possible that our young people are not gainfully engaged. The opportunity cost is that they'll be on the streets. You know, any issue where they're raising, they raise the challenges they have, they begin to address the public or begin to make, it is not a call for regime change. Look at the root cause of the discomfort they're having so that we can, you know, address them. But if our framework, our mindset is that, look, they are targeting the regime, then we will not be in a position to address those challenges.
All right,
so
Honorable.
I would like to call on our citizens, you know, to have the better frame of mind. This problem is not exclusive to any group. It's not exclusive to any part of the country. It was in the Northeast, it spread to Northwest, North Central.
All right, Honorable. We're also having a bit of challenge with your network.
So, for our economy, thank you.
All right, thank you very much for your thoughts there. I believe a Diet has joined us. A Diet, let's get your concluding thoughts on the issues on how to deepen democracy and, of course, correct or improve on the perceived flaws that we are experiencing.
Very much. I think two very critical things, particularly corruption, and the Honorable mentioned. The important thing with the pandemics is that who actually has been punished? Nobody has been punished. Secondly, again, is we cannot pick, and there should actually be separation of power, but there is no absolute separation of power. But one thing that is also important is that we do not maintain a fusion of power. We have to keep that in mind. And thirdly, there is no basis to actually blame Nigerians for most of the challenges that they face. More and more, we are beginning to put so much blame on citizens. But don't forget that these citizens are burdened by poverty. They are burdened also by the insecurity that they face on daily basis. And in particular, they are also burdened when they go to the polls to vote, stay in the scorching sun, and nothing actually gets delivered in terms of the dividend of democracy to them. I think these are important factors we really need to note. Aside from that, what we should actually do to add to what other people have actually spoken to is we need to forge a national identity at this point in our life. We all know that, yes, there might be agitations for secession hearing and there, but when the basics are actually given to people, all this will actually disseminate. So how do we forge a national identity? It also goes to democracy itself, which includes everybody, irrespective of their own religion, their ethnicity. Secondly, is also addressing impunity. Impunity seems to actually be a way of life, either in corruption, in the administration of justice system. And that's why we talk about having a constitution, but there is actually no constitutionalism. If as a country, we are able to holistically address impunity, I believe that maybe by next year, even if we do 10-20%, there will actually be a cause to celebrate Democracy Day, beyond the fact that we have actually had 22 uninterrupted years of democracy and 6 national elections in that regard. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Idai Hassan. Let's have Dr. Abdul's closing remarks.
Okay, very quickly, yes, it's true we have our challenges. We can do better than we are currently doing. I strongly believe that there is a strong relationship between democracy and development, and that people want democracy because they have certain developmental expectations, and therefore, how do we channel our democracy to actually respond to the social, economic, and the political realities of the people? So that this democracy is not just about politicians, and that the democracy is also about citizens. So how do we ensure that we reduce to some extent some of those perquisites associated with politics, and ensure that the motivation for going into electoral contest is not necessarily that material that we have continued to see, and that it is more people-oriented and developmental in character, and that can actually change the nature of the parliament that we are even talking about, because what took people there is different. But if you have the kind of system that we run today, with the domineering character of the political parties without a clearly defined or principled commitment to the realities of the people, it can become a challenge, and that's the major difficulty that we're dealing with it. There are structural issues involved. We need to do more around managing that. I agree the suggestion with that people put on the table. We can manage our diversity better.
All right.
Okay.
All right, we must thank you very much. Robust discussion in the studio here, and we do look forward to another Democracy Day that will be devoid of protest, and that will be devoid of some of the issues we have raised here, believing that the government at the center and at the subnational levels will do something to address some of the issues we've raised here. We must thank you, gentlemen, for making our time to be here with us. Professor Bell Ihua is the Executive Director, Africa Polling Institute. He joined us in the studio. We also have EJ in the studio to take a look at some of the issues, be definitely the country, and how we can address it.
And may God bless you. Happy Democracy Day, and let's work together.
Right.
Our own.
Also in the studio is our own Country Director, CARE International, Dr. Hussein Abdul.
And for those who joined us on our virtual platform, Honorable Toby Okechukwu, or the Deputy Minority Leader in the House of Representatives, Samson Itodo, Executive Director of Yaga Africa, and Idayat Hassan, the Executive Director of the Center for Democracy and Development. Thank you so much for joining us on a special day like this, where we've looked at how Nigeria can make progress, Democracy Day.
And for our esteemed viewers, we thank you for making our time to be with us. It's Democracy Day special on Africa Independent Television. Do have a wonderful celebration. Have a great day.
Politicians think of what works now, not with what will work in the future. They are not statesmen. They're always thinking of the election, not of the next generation. And that's why from generation to generation, how many generations have we had now since 1914? We've not performed well.
You cannot run a democracy without having some degree of understanding with the political parties.
We have to begin to respect our own systems too. What happened in the US is clearly showing us that copy and paste from United States to Nigeria is not actually what will work for us.
My name is Amechi Anapwe. Do have a nice day.
The world has become more connected than ever before. Every continent, color, race, language, and religion, even government, move towards common goals. We now live in a global village. Here on this program, we'll bring you global issues to shape our world.
Government can do a lot with tax revenues collected for health and education.
The role of the European Union is to accompany a partner, that is Nigeria, in offering our lessons learned to see whether together we can improve that situation.
The emphasis on education, on vocational training, on the development of entrepreneurship is absolutely critical to its democracy.
As we travel the world, we explore these issues of international and diplomatic relevance. Indeed, the global agenda that determine our national and common interests. With me, Tunde Alabi.
From fishing to farming, from oil and gas exploration to exploitation, from environmental pollution to eventual degradation. This is the story of a people bedeviled by the suffocating trinity of poverty, insecurity, and deprivation in the midst of their God-given